Janavallabha Girivaradadi Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Manachari Hari Jayam Vishnu Pai Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Shaturashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Raja Granta Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gauda Pramanandi All glories to the Simula Bodhis All glories to Shri Shri Guru Aham Gauranga Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Svabhadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyareva Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 5 Chapter 14 Text 37 Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Although people may be enemies, in order to fulfill their desires again and again, they sometimes get married. Unfortunately, these marriages do not last very long, and the people involved are separated again by divorce or other means. Purport. As stated previously, every conditioned soul has a propensity to cheat, even in marriage. Everywhere in this material world, one conditioned soul is envious of another. For the time being, people may remain friends, but eventually they become enemies again and fight over money. Sometimes they marry and then separate by divorce or other means. On the whole, unity is never permanent. Due to the cheating propensity, both parties always remain envious. Even in Krishna consciousness, separation and enmity take place due to the prominence of material propensities. Next verse. The path of this material world is full of material miseries, and various troubles disturb the conditioned souls. Sometimes he loses and sometimes he gains. In either case, the path is full of danger. Sometimes the conditioned soul is separated from his father by death or other circumstances. Leaving him aside, he gradually becomes attached to others, such as his children. In this way, the conditioned soul is sometimes illusioned and afraid. Sometimes he cries loudly out of fear. Sometimes he is happy maintaining his family. And sometimes he is overjoyed and sings melodiously. In this way, he becomes entangled and forgets his separation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead since time immemorial. Thus, he traverses the dangerous path of material existence. And on this path, he is not at all happy. Those who are self-realized simply take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in order to get out of this dangerous material existence. Without accepting the devotional path, one cannot get out of the clutches of material existence. The conclusion is that no one can be happy in material life. One must take to Krishna consciousness. Purport: by thoroughly analyzing the materialistic way of life, any sane man can understand that there is not the least happiness in this world. However, due to continuing on the path of danger from time immemorial, not associating with saintly persons, the conditioned soul, under illusion, wants to enjoy this material world. Material energy sometimes gives him a chance at so-called happiness, but the conditioned soul is perpetually being punished by material nature. It is therefore said, Dandya Jane Raja Yenanandite Chupai. Materialistic life means continuous unhappiness. But sometimes we accept happiness as it appears between the gaps. Sometimes the condemned person is submerged in water and hauled out. Actually, all this is meant for punishment, but he feels a little comfort when he is taken out of the water. This is the situation with the conditioned soul. All the Shastras therefore advise that one associate with devotees and saintly people. Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastrikai, Lavamatra Sadhu Sangha Sarva Siddhi Hoy. Even by a little association with devotees, a conditioned soul can get out of this miserable material condition. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore trying to give everyone a chance to associate with saintly people. Therefore, all the members of this Krishna conscious society must themselves be perfect sadhus in order to give a chance to fallen conditioned souls. This is the best humanitarian word. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we should take the conclusion of all these verses. The conclusion is that no one can be happy in material life. Just like in Vedic analysis, they'll provide like a thesis. It's called a Vishaya. Then a Samshaya, a doubt to the thesis. And then a Purvapaksha, an argument supporting the doubt to the thesis. And then a reconciliation, and then a Siddhanta is given. So although there may be so many points, the Siddhanta should be taken. So just like the Upanishadic literatures, there are so many various theses that are proposed, doubts are given, points that support the doubts, a reconciliation. Then the Siddhanta is given in the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra means the end of knowledge. Vedanta means the end of knowledge. So then the Siddhanta should be taken. There may be so many considerations by so many persons, but finally the Siddhanta should be accepted as the final conclusion and as a final understanding of the truth of the thing. Now we're hearing about the truth in the material world, and Prabhupada has said the conclusion is that no one can be happy in material life. So that conclusion should be accepted. The conclusion is no one can be happy. And then we're just hearing about varieties of unhappiness in the material world. Due to envy, due to various miseries, etc. But the conclusion is no one can be happy. And whatever happiness is perceived is described, it's the gap in between two suffering conditions. And the example Prabhupada gives in the purport is like when they used to punish people in olden times. Maybe they do it now too. Who knows what they're doing on some of these islands that no one knows about. But they would dump people into water, and right when they're on the verge of dying, they will pull them out of the water. And when he gets a breath of fresh air, even if it's polluted, it's fresh at that moment, he feels ecstatic, and he says, "Now I'm feeling happy." And then they dump him back under. It's a form of torture. So similarly, the material world is just this whole atmosphere is just a torture chamber. And every now and then one gets a little relief. And then he said the relief is taken to be happiness. And that's because the living entity doesn't know what real happiness is. Therefore, he has got a misunderstanding of happiness. If you know what real happiness is, no one can be satisfied with this material world. But because of time immemorial, or with a time without beginning, we have been existing in this material world, experiencing the miserable conditions. And the conditioned soul can adjust. The soul in general can adjust to anything, and he go find out his happy point. So he feels that it is not such a big deal. It's just like if you go to a place that smells really, really bad, or sometimes you take the train, the CTA here in Red Line, Red line is a little bit, as we would say, ghetto. And sometimes you get on the train and someone's passed water in like the back compartment and the whole train will be smelling very bad. You don't notice it. You get on and then what's that smell? Then the doors close. And you're trapped for at least one stop over 3 or 4 minutes. And then, but after some time, after 3 or 4 minutes, you're on the train, you forget the smell. You become adjusted to it. And like that, then you think this is normal. This is actually absolutely normal. So similarly, the living entity has been existing in the material world so long that the miserable conditions have become normalized for him. So you think this is perfectly normal. So much so, if we even go to people and say that you are suffering, they say this is normal. This is or they give some clever statement like this is the spice of life or whatever. They have a variety of statements because of the avarana shakti of Maya that covers the living entity's true understanding of what actual happiness is. So the relief we take to be happiness, and that way we've been existing in the material world since time immemorial, and without any awareness of Krishna. Ishade petasha viparyo ashmitihi. Ishade petasha means having turned away from Krishna. Then we are punished by a reverse conception of life, viparyo. A reverse conception of life means that which is a source of suffering, one takes to be a source of happiness. That which is a source of bondage, one takes to be a source of freedom. Like, for example, associating with the opposite sex is generally taken to be a source of great ecstasy, great bliss and happiness, isn't it? We become woman consciousness, isn't it? Or man consciousness, as it were. And that is actually a source of bondage and great misery. But because we're Ishade Petash, we've turned away from Krishna, Viparya, become reverse. So then there is no greater happiness than this. And the devotees say, Krishna, what is this Krishna? I'm going to get happy by doing that. We invite them to the temple. Come and join us in this happy program. Never invite people for japa unless they're like Andrew, who likes to meditate. Otherwise, they see us chanting japa, they will not be convinced that this Christian consciousness will give great happiness. Everyone's like suffering and anyway. So first we're punished with a reverse conception of life. Then the second result is ashmriti. Ashmriti means utter forgetfulness of the beauty of the Nama Rupa Guna Lila of Krishna. So being forgetful of the beauty of Krishna, one becomes all the more infatuated with the beauty of this world. If you don't know about the Nama Rupa Guna Lila of Krishna, then the Nama Rupa Guna Lila of this world becomes all the more attractive. And that way we've been existing in the material world since time immemorial, or time without beginning, and suffering. So the only way to get out of this situation is by centering our awareness on the center of all beauty, which is Krishna. That is the only way to actually get out of the material world. But it's not so easy. As we hear, it's not a mental imposition. In one sense, you can't just feel devotion in one sense, because devotion is actually a spiritual potency of Krishna, spiritual energy of Krishna. Can he actually focus his awareness on Krishna? And by such focus, he can come out of the material world. Otherwise, it's just, redundancy. As we're hearing all these verses, many of them sound like repetitive, because that's the nature of material existence, it's quite redundant. So one has to actually become empowered by bhakti, shakti, to think of Krishna. So where is that available? So then that is mentioned here. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastrikai. Lavamatra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. The devotees are the, they call this the Ashraya Vigraha. They are the shelter of this potency which can center one's attention on Krishna. Therefore, only by association with devotees can you get bhakti. Otherwise, you cannot get bhakti at all. So if one associates with devotees, all the shastras confirm, sarva shastrikoi. Lavamatra, even if you associate with devotees for a moment, then sarva siddhi, you can achieve all the perfections. Mainly, the main perfection is bhakti. So just by getting bhakti, you get everything, really. So sarva siddhi can just be taken as you get bhakti. Because by getting bhakti, you can get Krishna. By getting Krishna, you got everything, isn't it? Sarva Siddhi Hoy. So even by moment's association with sadhus, you can get bhakti because they have bhakti. Otherwise, without that association, then bhakti is not available in this material world. It's not available anywhere. It's nowhere to be found in this material world. Nowhere to be purchased. Only if you associate with a devotee can you actually get that power, that empowerment. Lava mantra, even if it is for half a moment. There's a nice verse I used to know. Bhava Pavarago Brahmato Yadha Bhavech Janasya Tarhachuta Satsamangama Satsangamo Yadi Tathaiva Sat Gatao Paravareshe Twayi Jayate Mati. This is a verse that Muchakunda is saying to Krishna, Achyuta. Achyuta comes in the verse, the infallible Supreme Lord. He says that, this is an interesting verse actually, I always like this verse. Bhavapavarago Brahmatoya Dhabhavech said this means when the living entity's material existence is about to come to an end, then at that time, Janasya Tarachuta Satsamangama, at that time he can get the association of devotees. And then Satsangama Yadi Tadaiva Sagato, then by such association, he becomes thoughtful of Krishna, Paravareshe, who's the controller of matter and spirit. He becomes immediately inclined, Jayate Mati, with a devotional mentality. So there's a very interesting verse. I mean, if you were hearing the translation, it's very interesting because it says when a living entity's material existence is coming to an end, at that time he gets the association of devotees. So that may make us feel a little bit hopeless. At least I would feel a little bit. Well, how am I supposed to know when my material existence is coming to an end? But they actually, in the purport, it's described that this is a type of aesthetic ornament called Atishayokti, which means that the cause is stated as an effect to show the power of the cause. So in the verse, the cause is stated as the effect. So the effect in the verse is the association of devotees, right? Because it says when your material existence is coming to an end, then you get a chance to associate with devotees. So this is stating as the effect, but actually, it's actually the reverse. By the association of devotees, your material existence comes to an end. But in order to show the swift action of the association with devotees, it's stated as the effect, to show how powerful that association is and how quickly it acts. Sat Samangama, those who are situated in Sat, the absolute truth. Then immediately you associate with them, the verse says Tadaiva. Tadaiva comes that only at that time and precisely at that moment you become thoughtful of Krishna and imbued with devotion, and by which your material existence is finished. So this is an interesting verse. So Tadaiva means only at that time. So that means without the association, there is no question of being able to center one's awareness on Krishna and get out of the material world. There's absolutely no question. And it also means, Sagatao means the devotees who only have Krishna as the goal of their life. In other words, that those who have the temporary as their goal, they'll never think of Krishna. So they need the association of Satgato, those who are only having Krishna fixed up as the goal of their life. Or it can mean, Gatal can mean that when devotees are there, immediately Krishna is there. Because it is mentioned that Krishna appears wherever devotees are gathered, glorifying him, etc. So that means that the reason a conditioned soul, when he associates with a devotee, he immediately becomes thoughtful of Krishna, is because wherever there's a devotee, there is also Krishna. So when you associate with a devotee, you also immediately think of Krishna. That's what the verse says. So the verse is a very beautiful verse by Muchakunda expressing the glories of Sadhu Sangha. There are so many verses, we could go through a long list of verses of Sadhu Sangha, but I gotta chant my rounds, so I'm going to be ending very shortly now. So then the question comes up that if the association of devotees is so powerful, immediately Jayate mati, I become immediately imbued with devotion, immediately thoughtful of Krishna. Material existence is finished. The question comes, I am associating with devotees, why am I not getting the effect? And the question, this natural question, why the effect is not coming? So Jiva Goswami describes that the reason the effect doesn't come, even when you have the association of devotees, is because the heart may be still captured by offenses, which manifests itself as disrespect for sadhus, or he gives two things, disrespect for sadhus, or the more pernicious one, thinking sadhus to be ordinary pious people. These are the an offensive, the heart captured by offensives. Either disrespect is there, which is of course very prominent in the age of Kali. We were trained to be disrespectful. In fact, if you weren't disrespectful, then you weren't considered to be very glorious growing up. Whoever could tell the best your mama jokes was considered an exalted sage amongst us. If he was good at cracking jokes. Actually, it's the fact. It says that the person demoted ignorance is expert at what is that? Ridiculing others. Expert at insulting others. Expert in insulting others. So I remember when this is tangential. When I was watching all those debates for that 1 month with Richard Dawkins and others. Richard Dawkins, he wouldn't have the most compelling arguments, but he was so good at insulting the theist, just making them, and then it just made them look like totally foolish because he was so good at insulting, and everyone would clap and applaud. Never mind if it was an actual good argument he was making, just because he was good at insulting, everyone would applaud and laugh, and he would win in this way. That is the nature of the conditioned life, of course, in general, and all the more so in Kali Yuga, where we're trained to be disrespectful. So then that's one problem, is disrespect. But that's not even as pernicious as the other problem of seeing devotees to be ordinary pious people, and thereby becoming negligent or lacking reverence for devotees. In this way, Jiva Goswami describes that although you may get the association of devotees, unless you are blessed with their mercy, that their mercy which corrects us and removes our offenses, then we do not benefit from their association. So association is so powerful, undoubtedly. Immediately, sarvasiddhi hoy. Sarvasiddhi hoy means you get bhakti. Because by getting bhakti, you can get Krishna. By getting Krishna, you get everything. Sarvasiddhi hoy. And lava mantra, even a moment's association is sufficient. But so much association may be there, but because of disrespect or because of a vision of them as ordinary persons, then we become unable to get the benefit of their association. Therefore, Jiva Goswami describes we need the extra, we need their mercy. Their mercy which removes our offensive mentality. And when the offensive mentality is removed, then immediately it acts. It also is mentioned, Chaitanya Charitamrita or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the 5 most potent forms of bhakti, Nam, Kirtan, Sadhu Sangha, Bhagavat Shravan, worship of the deity, and living in Mathura Vasa. These have the power to bestow bhava. Bhava is the preliminary stage of love of God. These have the power to bestow bhava immediately if the person is not offensive. And the verse which is interesting about this verse, it says, even if the person lacks faith. This is a verse, it comes in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It comes at the end of, I don't know where the Nectar Devotion is, which chapter, I forget. It's mentioned in chapter 22, the CC of the Madhya Lila, Shanatang Shiksha. This is an incredible verse. It says, even if the person lacks faith, if he associates with any one of these 5 most potent forms of anga, most potent forms of bhakti, then immediately he gets bhava. He can get bhava, provided he's not offensive. You don't even have to have faith. The verse says, no, even if you have no shraddha, but you associate without offense, then immediately bhava comes. Unfortunately, generally it is the case that it is hardly an offenseless soul to be found. For that, you need the mercy of sadhus. Their extra mercy has to be there. Just getting their association means mercy has come. But we are not able to get anything from that mercy. So we need extra mercy of their speeches, particularly their speeches, which removes the anarthas of bad mentalities and allows us to gain much from their association. There's a lot more that could be said, but I'm going to finish there so I can do other things. Are there any questions? It's simple points.
Sorry. And the purport, there is a line. Material life means continuous unhappiness, but sometimes we accept happiness as it is appears between the gaps. What do you mean by the gaps?
Yeah, that I described in the beginning of the class. Prabhupada gives an example here only. He says it's like a man, he's dumped in the water. There's a form of torture. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions this example also. He dumps him in the water. Then just when he's on the verge of drowning, then they pull him out. And then he goes, then he feels happy at that moment. And then they dump him again. And then he's just on the point of drowning and they pull him out again. So that is happiness. So similarly in the material world, we're being pounded by so many miseries. And then the misery stop for a second and we say, now I'm happy. It is a gap in between two miserable conditions. The gap on one side, misery, on the other side, misery. And in between, a little relief. So that relief is called as happiness. On one side, you're miserable. On the other side, just like, for example, suppose divorce was given in the purport. So divorce is a very nasty thing, and especially in the Western world, because there's so much court, money is spent and all these things. So to get divorced is to have a bad relationship with the wife is bad, and then to get a divorce is bad also. And let's say you have to go to the courtroom to get a divorce and all these things. You have to go through these things. Then while you're driving to the court, then one of your favorite songs comes on the radio, and you start singing that song. And for a little bit, you forget about all the miserable, and then you say that you feel a little happy. And then you get out of the car, you go to the courtroom, and it's back to miserable condition. So when there's misery and misery in between, there's little relief. The conditioned soul calls that happiness, like that. I forgot to make the point that Prabhupada says here that all the members of this Christian conscious society must themselves be perfect sadhus in order to give a chance to fallen conditioned souls. This is the best humanitarian work. So that's an interesting point. Best humanitarian work involves actually just becoming perfect sadhus. Because if we become perfect sadhus, then people will benefit so much just by associating with us. Even if we speak very little bit or nothing at all. Just by association, they can get a lot of benefit. And of course, again, if they're offensive, then they require a little extra mercy. But this is the best humanitarian work, that we have to become empowered by Bhakti Shakti, which means we have to get it, which means our own work in becoming Krishna conscious by associating with devotees properly and rendering service unto them. That is where this is the best humanitarian work. Of course, going out and preaching all these things, this is, in one sense, this is what you call a corollary, or it follows the quest for self-realization. Yeah, corollary. I think corollary is the right word. Bharata bhumite haya manusha janmayar janama sataka kari karapara upakar. First, as Prabhupada translates this verse, first make yourself perfect by becoming Krishna conscious, and then give it to others. Of course, these two things happen simultaneously, proportion to the degree of Krishna consciousness, that degree you can give. But the idea is that preaching to others is a corollary activity. It follows the degree of self-realization. Say it another way, if we stretch ourselves too thin in the name of conquest, the conquest mentality, but you have no bhakti shakti, then, of course, it's nice on the one hand because you're trying to search for the Prabhupada's movement. So definitely you get the blessings of Srila Prabhupada. But we should not be surprised if we find it not very effective in terms of transformation of the hearts of people. Because in order for the transformation of the heart to take place, we have to become like Chintamani gems. Otherwise, the transformation won't take place. And you can go on giving lots of classes and all these things, but we have to get Bhakti Shakti. We have to become perfect sadhus, Prabhupada is saying here. That's a heavy statement, obviously. So anyway, this should give us the perspective of whatever little bit we are doing in terms of outreach to others, humanitarian work, is for our self-purification until we become perfect sadhus. One should not think I'm going out to save the conditioned souls, because that's not actually possible. Because we don't have any bhakti shakti. How you will save them? If you have no potency, how you will save them? But we're trying to get that potency by rendering service to sadhu. So we should think rather in terms of our self-purification. And that way we don't become attacked by a self-righteous mentality. Yeah.
You made this point that the conclusion then is that we have to center our attention on the all-attractive Krishna. And to do that, one needs empowerment. And that empowerment is called bhakti, which I thought was a very beautiful definition. I've never heard that definition before, but it made so much sense. So then it's not just up to us to think, okay, well, I'm going to remember Krishna all day long. It's not going to happen unless we have that empowerment. So I guess how do we attract that empowerment?
No, I already explained that in the class. That was the whole class.
The association of sadhus, yes, but that's it.
Yeah, what more of that explanation required?
Thank you.
Yeah, associate with devotees, yeah.
Thanks a lot for the class, Prabhu.
Was it positive?
The question is about how it can be more positive, but was able to ask. I mean, you rightly noted that you rightly made 2 points. One is devotees while chanting are not always positive or happy, and
Chanting japa.
yeah, in general, perhaps, yeah. And then you also said the natural condition of soul is to be happy. I mean, if we don't feel spiritual happiness, we seek material happiness, or
Okay.
rather.
Okay.
So
I didn't exactly say it, but I get your point.
perhaps you can
Yeah.
make it more accurate in your response. So in our situation, living in this temple or staying around this temple and serving, how can we be happy? We are not. It was your observation that we are not happy chanting, and we are also not
Happy.
into material happiness as it is. We are
You're scared
supposed
to say straightforwardly because it's now the Prabhu who's sitting behind you.
No. I'm trying to
Prabhu,
say.
I'm not happy. How can I be happy in the temple?
No, I mean, we're not supposed to be materially happy. I mean, we're not supposed to get into material sense gratification. And when I eat too much prasadam, you say gratifying senses. For everything that when we try to do anything with the senses, you say you're doing sense gratification. You shouldn't do happy. You shouldn't be gratifying your senses that way. And at the same time, when we are trying to cultivate our spiritual life, it's like churning an ocean of poison. And obviously, at our stage of another nivritti, we see a lot of poison coming up, and it's not a happy experience. Not always, at least.
Sure,
Not for all
ever.
people.
The poison, when you see all the poison coming up, all the anarthas rising up, it's not always a happy experience. I don't ever remember it being happy in my case. He said it's not always a happy experience. I don't ever remember it being a happy experience. For this thing, Krishna advises Tam to Tiksha Sabharata. The context of this verse, this is a very important verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna summarizes all his teachings in 5 verses, those first few verses before text 16. So he mentions about the nature of the soul being different from matter. Dehi no smin yata dehi, like that. So then the commentary comes, Arjuna would say, this is how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur places it. Very good philosophy. It's positive. I'm not matter. I'm different from this world. Therefore, I'm not actually suffering, etc. But I'm still identifying with men. I'm still attached to Bhishma and Drona, and particularly their bodies. And Krishna says, yes, that's right, actually. And therefore, there will be some disturbance in the mind, right? How does that? Mantra sparshas tu konteya, chitoshna sukadukada. It is due to sense perception. Sense perception means the mental disturbance is coming. The senses contact the sense object in the form of Bhishma and Drona, and the mind is transformed on account of the sensual contact, becomes disturbed. And what is Krishna's advice to that? Tam titikshra subharata. That you have to learn how to tolerate that. And then Krishna says in the next verse that if you learn how to be sober in the face of the duality of happiness and distress, sukha, dukkha, what is that? The dhiram. Something dhira, I forget. Anyway, you learn how to be dhira. Sama sukha dukkha dhira. You learn how to be equal in sukha and dukkha. And dhira means you fix your intelligence on your duty and context there. Let's say on our process. Then he says, certainly the amrita of liberation will be tasted by such a person. So when we're dealing with our anarthas, generally that may not be a very happy experience. And for that, we will just have to tolerate because there's nothing else that can actually be done about that. But there is something we can do. We can become proactive in terms of what is going to take for us to actually get out of the material existence. So being tolerant of that on the one hand, and proactive on the other hand, in terms of association with devotees, chanting the holy name of Krishna, honoring prasadam, and all of the above, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, we can be proactive in that area. There's no need to focus, zoom in on the various anarthas that will inevitably come up in the course of our progress, but rather we can focus on the other positive aspects of Krishna consciousness. And with great gratitude, keep the consciousness fixed on those particular points, which are sources of actually great inspiration and gratitude. When you means when you do it properly, when it's actually obtained, when you find inspirational sangha, or usually it stems from sangha first, and then it spills out to other things like taste for hearing, taste for chanting, like that. But it usually starts with inspirational sangha. So when you find some inspirational sangha, then you just grab hold of that, and that keeps one very positive overall. And then the anarthas will be there, but they will be more or less inconsequential. It's a course of purification like that. So what will be the difficulty then? No difficulty at all. Yeah, Nityananda Prime wants to say something.
To add to what you said, when anarthas, or we recognize our anarthas, it's described that they're meant to be an impetus to enhance our sangha of the Vaishnavas from whom we're getting our inspiration. So it is actually acts as a beneficial impetus. And the second is to look to the other side of the anarthas. The tendency is to look at what all we've got. But the encouragement is to look as to what it will be beyond it, on the other side. That is, the focus is on Nishtha. While we're going through that, oh, this is very nice, Krishna is removing so that I can be on the other side of things. And it's easy to lose that. It's easy to get caught into, boy, I have this and I have this and I have a lot of that, and again this is showing up like that. But we are encouraged to look to the other side. So it's not so bearing on us as to how much we have, but what is it that we are being freed of.
There's something between me and these two fellows here. from a conversation we had at the prasadam table last week. Yeah, Sean and Siddhartha. So I'm like an acupuncturist. I like to press on the pressure points. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for your class. Um, a very striking point you made is when one's material existence is coming towards end, then he will get sadhu sangha. And you better explain in a way like because of sadhu sangha, this material existence can be ended. So again, our vision is so blurred, our consciousness is so down, and with this sadhu sangha, it's like devotees give example of sugar candy and we being suffering from jaundice. So how we can take maximum benefit of sadhu sangha when our consciousness is so reverse, of the sadhus?
By service, seva, in one word. By rendering service.
But Vaishnava don't allow us to serve them.
Huh?
Personally, we cannot serve Vaishnava in any way.
I didn't understand. Then you're in great difficulty. You have to figure it out. Actually, generally, we want to be recognized for whatever we do. It's called fruit of mentality. So if you say that devotees don't allow, which I would doubt that, but even if it were the case, then all the more reason to become clever, how to get that mercy. Just like Kalidas, Kalidas. He was an amazing. He's probably one of my favorite personalities in the scriptures. Now that I think about it, he's amazing because he never made any discrimination between Vaishnavas. He used to just take everyone's remnants. He was very attached to getting the foot dust of the Vaishnavas and eating their remnants without any discrimination. Anyone who was a Vaishnava, he would take it. And it's mentioned later on in his pastime, because of his great faith in Vaishnavas, he was able to receive mercy that no one else was able to receive. And that particular mercy was described as the drinking water that had washed Lord Chaitanya's feet. Because before Lord Chaitanya would walk into the temple of Puri, he would wash his feet at the bottom of the staircase. And Swarup Damodar Goswami, Ramananda Roy, a few others, they would be standing guard so that no one could get that water. And he had such great faith in the Vaishnavas that he one time walked right up to the water and he took 1, 3, 2, 3. Then after he was going for the fourth one, Lord Chaitanya said, "That's enough. That's enough." and then Kaviraj Goswami ends that section by saying, because of his great faith in the Vaishnavas, he received mercy that no one else could receive. So he was very clever. No Vaishnavas generally don't think themselves as such. That's the general nature of their consciousness, especially very exalted Vaishnavas. They think that all others are great and they are not so great. The general tendency of their consciousness is like that. So when Kalidas would ask for the foot dust or for the remnants of the food, no Vaishnava would agree. They were like, how could I give it to you? I'll become condemned by doing so. Many wonderful pastimes are there. So Kalidas would say, okay, no problem. Hare Krishna. And then they will be walking off and he will be hiding behind some store, some store. Okay, he almost saw me, And then when they would walk off, then he would run and just jump in the dust, roll around. One time, Jaru Thakur, Shudra, had a Shudra form, like that. So he did not want to agree to give his remnants. So Kalidas said, okay, no problem. He bought one mango there, and he gave it to him. Then he went somewhere and hid. And then Jaru Thakur's wife fed him the mango, and then she took, then they just threw it somewhere in the corner. And then when they walked off, he ran over there. And I'm not recommending this as a practice per se. Another thing Kalidas did, which was quite far out, is that he used to gamble, breaking the 4 regulative principles. He used to gamble dice. He would roll dice. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, of course, warns us don't try to imitate Kalidas. Because we, Hare Krishna, what the, we lose our Christian consciousness kind of quite quickly. So we can't imitate Kalidas. But he used to gamble also. So he was very unconventional Vaishnava. The point for me telling this story is that none of the devotees would agree to be served by him. So he had to become very clever how to do it. So I doubt that devotees are not giving us chance. But even if it were the case, all the more reason to become enthusiastic, how to render service so they don't even notice it. Another case example, Narottam Das Thakur, where his spiritual wanted to be initiated by Lokanath Goswami. Lokanath Goswami had made vow not to receive any disciples. And when Narottam Das Thakur asked him, he said, no, I haven't made vow. He was very fixed in his vow. So then the place where he used to pass stool, every day he would go to that same place, and every day he would find it completely clean. So he was bewildered. What is going on here? So one day he did his business, and then he went into a tree, hiding to see what was going on. And then he saw Narottam Das Thakur was cleaning it. And so he came out and chastised him. He said, you're from a very well-to-do family and very low. How can you do this? And at that time again, Narottam Das Thakur offered his submission. I don't know. I think Lord Chaitanya had to tell Lokanath Goswami to accept Narottam Das Thakur before he agreed. So the point is that, like this, from these stories, you see that devotees, they do not become discouraged if devotees are not giving them service directly. You do like this, you do like that. Rather, they're using their intelligence how to serve and figuring it out. And that's actually the definition of intelligence that we hear from of enthusiasm that we hear from the Nectar of Instruction. What is that definition? Endeavor with intelligence, for the sake of Krishna Guru. So then, like that, where is the difficulty? It actually may just be an indication of our own lack of enthusiasm. Oh, devotees are not giving, therefore they are not merciful. No, not that we're thinking that, but maybe we're not enthusiastic. We have to use our intelligence how to serve. And in that way, if you do that, then there's unlimited opportunities for service. In part, in that NOI 3, Prabhupada says that service to Krishna is not limited. Because our family members would think like that, right? That why are you joining this Krishna conscious movement? You're going to limit the scope of the amount of happiness you can achieve. But actually, Prabhupada says service to Krishna is not limited because Krishna is all pervasive. So wherever you go in the whole universe, there's opportunity for service to Krishna and Guru, like that. So it's just a matter, and then Prabhupada describes there also that enthusiasm is a matter of unearthing the opportunity. So because Krishna is all pervasive, there's opportunity everywhere in the whole universe. But it requires enthusiasm to unearth the opportunity. Unearth, I'm using the word unearth, just like gold may be under the ground. So look, expert, how do you say? Gold digger. That has a different connotation in the Western world. Anyway, gold digger. He becomes expert how to find the gold. So similarly, by the strength of our enthusiasm, we become expert how to unearth the opportunity for seva to Vaishnavas, to Krishna, because this opportunity is existing everywhere. So what is the difficulty? The only difficulty will be in our own lack of enthusiasm, which we have to admit does manifest from time to time. Okay. Stopping us from advancing. Embarrassing, yeah. Yeah, that's nice. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.